Over 1,200 killed in Israel. Babies beheaded. Cold-blooded massacre. Women abducted. The elderly taken hostage. Over 1,000 killed in Gaza. Indiscriminate bombing. Toddlers killed. Civilians collateral. A strip now reduced to rubble. 2 million people cut off from essential supplies. No food, no water, no electricity, no medicine, no saline to even wash wounds. An act of unfathomable terror versus a humanitarian crisis at hand. When the laws of war are not followed, a lot gets lost in the fog of war. In this Israel-Palestine war, perspective has been collateral. What we see unfold has its seeds in history. A conflict that has killed lakhs, displaced millions over decades. A conflict best described as intractable, complicated, deadlocked. With the backdrop of a brutal invasion by Israel and a barbaric pushback by Hamas. With its historical context and the current conflict, can one support Palestine yet condemn Hamas terrorism? Can one condemn Israel occupation yet support Israelis? Top focus on To The Point this evening.
I'm going to cut across immediately to my colleague Geeta Mohan, our Foreign Affairs editor, to expand in context because, Geeta, right now, we're at the precipice of the cusp where it's very easy and we are compelled to take sides and take stands. And social media is flush with hashtag I stand with Palestine, hashtag I stand with Israel. And one really doesn't blame most people because the kind of visuals that we are seeing are horrific. But, for the benefit of our viewers, if we can track back where the seeds of the current conflict have been sown through history, would you give us more perspective on that?
Well, Preeti, the fact that we've seen a Hamas attack and nobody can condone a terror attack or an attack of such magnitude where scores of people have died and so many remain injured in hospitals. But the fact is that there is a backstory. There were about 270 deaths in West Bank alone in the past 2 months. What was the international outrage or coverage on the issue? We have seen in the past year and a half or two, for that matter, an increased aggression from the Israeli side when it comes to Palestine and Palestinian territories. We've seen the pushing of Palestinians into corners in West Bank and in Gaza. Again, nobody's condoning a terror attack. Hamas has taken a very extreme step, but we've seen under the Netanyahu administration with Ben-Gvir as the national security minister, how the landscape, the political landscape of Israel and Palestine changing. Al-Aqsa Mosque being breached, never seen before, forces entering. The fact that refugee camps have been bombed and raided time and again in the recent past. The Sheikh Jarrah locality where Palestinians were being displaced. If you look at the map from 1948, when Israel was created,
we're going to play that map out. Just 1 second, Geeta. We're going to play that map out, and maybe our viewers would also get a bit of context with what we're just playing. Go ahead, Geeta.
Right. If you look at the map of Israel from the time of its creation in 1948, and if you look at the past map even before 1948. Right now what we're showing you is a map of the
So we'll play the shrinking territory of Palestine. We'll just tell our producer.
Yes,
there you go.
That's the map. So if you look at the 1917 is, up until 1947 is how that map looked. That was Palestine. for you. And then in 1948, when when Israel was created, you have Israel in green and you have Palestine in yellow, which included West Bank, the old city of East Jerusalem, as also Gaza, which is the tiny corner on the left end. And then you have the situation today where you have West Bank as that yellow patch on the right and Gaza as the small strip, that's called the Gaza Strip, to the left of the map. And this is not just the current map. If you look at the current territory, the West Bank also is a little more in scatter, Preeti, because we've seen the announcement of Jerusalem as the capital city. There are a lot of settlers who've moved into territories which were erstwhile Palestine. So there is a huge problem in how the Netanyahu administration was dealing with Palestine. Ben-Gvir, the far right coming into power, and how they were dealing with Palestine. The Palestinians were losing patience, being bombed and raided, the killings, without any outrage. You know, all the conversations were confined to the United Nations, and maybe the United Nations Secretary General asking for or condemning the attacks. The others condemned, but there was no clear outrage the way we are seeing today, which is called for. We're not saying this is not called for, but we're just saying that it would have been great if people would have really focused and noticed what was happening in Gaza. We know that the Israelis say that they are handling the territories by themselves, and that Israel no longer has control over these areas. But look at Gaza today. They've shut the borders. Electricity flows in from Israel, food, water. Today, as a retribution, as punishment, borders have been shut, food, water, electricity has been shut in a strip which houses 2.2 million people in an area that's just about 365 kilometers, square kilometers in geographical space. It is the most densely populated area on the planet. And many, including David Cameron, former Prime Minister of the UK, have actually called it the world's largest open prison. So there needs to be an introspection. Nobody is saying what Hamas did
And
is
it's
right.
difficult to do so right now because the kind of barbarism which has been unleashed by Hamas is so overwhelming that many of us, and understandably, are caught up in that. Some of us who've been traditional Palestine supporters in terms of, of what their cause has been, today are questioning that cause, and understandably, because the extent of the terrorism is so deep. Geeta, stay with me. We're going to come back to the question of how India policy where Palestine is concerned, Israel is concerned, has developed. But I just want to bring in Sushant Sareen, Senior Fellow, ORF, Strategic Affairs Expert. Also with us is Mr. Khurram Omar, National Secretary, RUML. I want to cut across to Sushant Sareen first. Sushant Sareen, understandably with what Geeta and I were talking about, the visuals that are right now going viral, what we see on national television, are so overwhelming and so barbaric and so brutal that one does somewhere down the line tend to forget what has been the inception of it all.
Yeah, but Preeti, I think the story given by Geeta has been rather one-sided on the inception of this whole conflict. It's not my side. It's what is the reality. When the partition plan was approved in 1948, who were the ones who opposed it? Who were the ones who refused to accept that UN sanctioned plan? The Israelis, or the new state of Israel, got virtually only the Negev desert, which was not a blade of grass grew out there. And the Arabs got together and invaded them because they refused to accept the partition plan. That is when the first fight happened. Later on, in 1967, again, it was not as though the Arabs were living in peace. There were constant forays into Israeli territory. There were constant attacks against Israel. And finally, there was a war in which the Israelis captured most of the area, including the Golan Heights, including West Bank, including Gaza. Then there was a peace process. And I don't know why Geeta hasn't mentioned the peace process. And there was a time when not only did, forget the fact that Israel completely vacated the Gaza Strip, but even on the West Bank, the deal that had been worked out at Camp David virtually gave them 94 to 98% of the entire West Bank. that was virtually a two-state solution, not entirely, but virtually, and the Palestinians refused to accept it. So there, it's a kind of a complicated history. There have been mistakes made from all sides, and I don't think we should take a one-sided view of it. There have been certainly mistakes made by Israel, and one does not completely condone everything that Israel has done, but that does not mean that we simply whitewash what the Arabs have done, and make it completely look one-sided. So that is one part of it. The second part of it is what is happening now. And again, I think, India has had a traditional position as far as the issue of Palestine is concerned. That position has also evolved. If I remember correctly, India was one of the countries, and I would somewhat say shamefully, which opposed the partition plan. We accepted our own partition, but we opposed the partition for somebody else. But let that be. Traditionally, we recognized Israel later on, but we never had full diplomatic relations. And we had a certain position on the Palestine issue, but later on it's kind of evolved, and we are now more or less inclined in terms of a two-state solution. That has been India's traditional position, and I think India still sticks to it. But look, that the political side and the those negotiated solution is one side. People are conflating what the Hamas has done with the brutality they have done, with the indiscriminate nature of killing that they have carried out, with the fact that now there is a retaliation taking place. Again, people are saying that this is a disproportionate reaction. Please tell me, what is a proportionate reaction to a child being butchered, a women being mass raped, mass killings taking place in cold blood? You go into somebody's house and butcher people down, gun people down. What is a proportionate reaction according to you? And just put yourself and your family, and I don't want to really make it personal, but just put yourself in that.
Sareen, the fact is, I understand nobody's trying to paint one side of the picture, because yes, there are two sides to the coin, and therefore where the conflict stands today is intractable and as complex as it is. So there are two sides of the picture, and I don't think Geeta meant to give just one side, because with what you've just elucidated, just about 2 months ago, there have been killings on the other side as well of 8-year-old children. You and I both understand that, and nobody's denying either or.
Yeah,
Geeta, do you want to come in?
Absolutely. I agree with all of what
Let Geeta come in, sir, coming right back to you, and we'll bring in a third guest.
I agree with all of what Sushant has said, but I'm just saying that adding a little bit more context to the extremity and the extreme actions that have taken place on the 7th of October, again, not justifying it, and also not saying that Israel's action is or anger is unfounded. It's absolutely founded on grounds where a terror attack has taken place. But look at what has happened in the recent past. The far-right government of Netanyahu, where he had to join hands with extreme political parties who have a very conservative and far-right approach, with Ben-Gvir as the national security minister, changed the landscape and politics of the region, Sushant, when it comes to how they were dealing with the Palestinians, what they were doing to the Palestinians, and how Gaza certainly is an area where they say that the Israeli forces left in 2005, but when it comes to control, whether if it's their livelihood, their life per se, it is all dependent on Israel. So there is a dichotomy in what is being said and what is the situation on the ground is all.
Geeta, I'm going to come right back, and I'll go back to Mr. Sareen because he wanted to come in for a rebuttal, but allow me to bring in our third guest, Mr. Khurram Omar, National Secretary, IUML. Very vociferous the IUML has been, Mr. Omar, considering India really hasn't changed its stance. To come out and say that you condemn terrorism is not supporting, changing your stance on where India vis-a-vis Palestine is concerned.
Right. We have not, if you say so, we can agree to that India has not changed its stand and will not side with terrorism. Who started this terrorism? My learned friend, Mr. Sareen, said that in 1948, he took us there that the partition was done. It was an arm-twisting thing. In your home, you sit down and do the partition and decide whatever you say is right and the other party is wrong. Does that mean that everything is good now? We strongly condemn any atrocity done on any other country or community anywhere in the world, including our country, including Israel, including Palestine. That is our stand very clear, especially when women, children, and old are being killed from decades. It's not a story which started yesterday or 2 months back or 3 months back. Your editor Geeta ji has already explained the whole thing. What was the situation then and what is the situation now as far as the Palestine area of Gaza, area of Palestine, area of Israel is concerned. All these years, these atrocities by the Israelis were being done. We did the lip service here and there, and that's about all. Nobody is bothered about how many people killed, how many children killed, how many women killed, how many old persons killed during all these years since 1948 till date. The Western countries, especially America, Israel, they decided that they had done the partition and now they have the right, without the acknowledgement of the other party, which is the most affected. Nobody talked to them. Nobody consulted them. I don't agree to this fact that they had agreed to a certain partition thing and then they backed out. This is absolutely incorrect. This is absolutely wrong to say that. Now, who is doing the terrorism since 1948 till date? We condemn the attacks of Hamas also on the women and children in Israel. Our hearts reach out to them also. But this is happening today. What was happening since last 70, 75 years? Nobody is saying anything about it. Suddenly, the only thing we took up that Hamas, one organization, they started attacking Israel. They may have their own reasons. We don't agree to their attack on the women and children. If there is a war, let the
Mr. Omar, do you condemn? Okay, can I encapsulate with what you're saying? Do you condemn the terrorism by Hamas as you support the cause of Palestine? Is that what you're trying to say?
Terrorism, you call it terrorism. They call it as their fight for their
What
own
do you
land.
call it, sir?
What? No. The thing is, आपके घर में कोई घुस गया, somebody entered your house and killing your children.
Mr. Umar, I'll ask you that question again. Maybe, okay, sir, calm down. You know, it's a very basic question. That's the reason why we are having this debate. You know, the fact is, a lot of us might stand with the cause of Palestine, but should we not unequivocally condemn the terrorism that was seen on the 7th of October? Yes or no? That's my question to you.
Any attack on women and children and old should be considered as terrorism. Yes. But
okay.
Tell me, just give me an answer. In your house, your neighbor has entered your house. They are attacking, they are killing, and it has been going on from last 70 plus years.
But Mr. Umar, that's the reason why we are having this debate. That's the sole reason for, having this debate, getting you on board.
That is a fact, and we should condemn. And now today they are talking about nuking Gaza.
Okay.
This is what is
Sareen,
in the news today.
Okay, sir. Okay, Mr. Sareen has been patient. We'll cut across to Mr. Sareen and then I'll go to Geeta on what has been, India's stand through it all. But Mr. Sareen, you wanted to come in for a rebuttal earlier. Go ahead, sir.
No, I want to come into a rebuttal not only to what Geeta was saying, but also what Mr. Omar is saying. And for a moment, I was pleasantly surprised that Mr. Omar is taking an unequivocal stand against terrorism, which Hamas had done, and he would name and shame them. But unfortunately, towards the end, the moment you add an if and a but, then you are equivocating, and that's what I believe Mr. Omar has done. But let me just break this down. Number one, there is this whole question of, Geeta raised about a right-wing government. Yeah, there is a right-wing government. But Geeta, please tell me, where has the pushback come in Israel to the right-wing government? Hasn't it come from the Israelis who have been protesting very hard?
Absolutely.
And Netanyahu and his government has been losing its popularity. If you are talking about a 75, 77-year-old crisis, yeah, there will be these kind of phases when these kind of people will come into power. And then there is a there is a very vibrant and dynamic civil society in Israel, and a large number of people who've always advocated a kind of a peaceful and negotiated solution. So to dump everything and kind of explain what Hamas has done on internal politics in Israel, in which a lot of blood-curdling statements might have come. But let's look at the blood-curdling statements coming from the Arab world or from Iran. What do they say? They also talk about complete extermination of the entire Jewish race. And they say not only in Palestine, anywhere in the world. That is their ideology. And in fact, and Mr. Umar should correct me if I'm wrong, they actually quote religion to reaffirm that point. But that is just one. Secondly, it's very easy to say that somebody came into my house. Whose house did Hamas enter? Hamas entered Israel's house. Hamas entered their house, and they entered their territory, which is their territory according even to the UN resolution.
But, that's nobody. Mr. Sari, nobody's contesting that. But what the point was being made of was 1948, and not so much of what Hamas did on the 7th of October. But you made your point. I want to bring in Geeta for a quick comment as well. Geeta, something we've not been able to touch upon has been what has been India's.
Can I just add one sentence?
Something here?
Can I just add one sentence?
So one sentence,
just
yes.
One sentence. So, we keep talking.
Sir, I'm afraid your internet is not allowing you to make that one sentence. Your voice is, we are losing you. But Geeta, sir, Mr. Omar, 10 seconds, Mr. Omar, come in and then I'll go to Geeta. 10 seconds, sir, make your point.
Mr. Sareen is now asking today that whose house did Hamas enter? Exactly, whose house?
Okay.
Where was Israel? What is
Okay,
Israel?
Mr. Omar, 10 seconds. Sir, you've made your point that it started in 1948. Geeta, I'll bring you in to the conversation. Closing comments, and we're going to play those graphics out for our viewers as well. Where India's stand was concerned, right from the beginning, have we really changed in terms of policy, and how has it evolved?
No, we have not changed in terms of policy. See, when Prime Minister Modi traveled to Israel, he made a standalone visit to Israel and then a standalone visit to Palestine as well. But when it comes to this attack, there are two statements that came from Prime Minister Modi, unequivocally coming out and condemning the entire attack, calling Hamas a terrorist, calling this entire act a terrorist act and Hamas a terrorist organization. So there is no question of how India views the October 7th event. Does that change India's policy on Palestine itself? No, because Hamas, if you think, is representative of all Palestinians, that's not the case. West Bank is very different from Gaza, and the Palestinian Authority is very different from Hamas. So the position of India on a two-state solution remains, and it's not just India, it's almost all countries, including Israel's allies, the United States of America, and all the other Western countries, who actually come to one point and agree on one point, that is a two-state solution for Israel and the question of Israel and Palestine. And that's certainly something that is a continuum for India in its foreign policy, at least for now.
Okay. Well, we're going to leave it at that. I appreciate Geeta for joining us. Both gentlemen, thank you for taking out the time. And for our viewers, and I'm sure the visuals that you see are very compelling for all of us to take a stand in terms of the sheer barbarism of it on either sides of the divide, especially the kind of visuals we've seen coming up from the atrocities of Hamas. But maybe instead of hashtag I stand with Israel, or hashtag I stand with Palestine or Hamas, hashtag maybe get more perspective. Leave it at that.